Welcome to Emancipation's podcast. A quick note before we begin. The following interview is with Mehdi Belhaj Kacem. And if you're not aware of his work, he's a French philosopher. According to Badiou, just about 10 or 12 years ago, he said that Kacem is the most important young French philosopher currently living. The late David Graeber also said that Mehdi Belhaj Kacem is amongst the top 5 most important thinkers working today. And so I think this is a quite interesting interview. It is about a brand new book that is out only in French, not in English. It's not yet translated, but it is called Nietzsche and Western Psychosis. This is the topic of the podcast. As many of you know, I've also written a new book on Nietzsche called How to Read Like a Parasite. And in my text, I take on what I consider to be a sort of problematic legacy of left-wing French Nietzscheanism. So we focus a lot on that. We focus on understanding Nietzsche's thought, what is singular about it, what is most useful about Nietzsche, what the downside and the shortfalls, the shortcomings of Nietzscheanism really are. I hope that you all find this conversation as useful as I did. All right, greetings, friends and comrades. Welcome to a very special episode with Mehdi Belhaj Kacem and Saad Boutayeb, who is both very good friends of our program. This is the second time that Mehdi has joined us on the show. The first time we had a podcast, which was very much an introduction to Mehdi Belhaj Kacem for an English audience. Today, we're speaking to Mehdi regarding his new work on Nietzsche. It is a thorough and very impressive criticism and analysis of the ontology of Nietzsche's thought. My own work looks more at Nietzsche's politics. Mehdi actually gets into the philosophical side of Nietzsche. And one of the things that I wanted to understand from this conversation is sort of to begin. Who is Nietzsche for you, Mehdi, and what is the significance of Nietzsche for philosophy as such?
Well, for me, as a literary guy, literature guy, at the beginning, I started publishing very soon, but reading when I was a child. I read Lovecraft at 9, Philip K. Dick at 11, Americans. So I was very attracted. And Nietzsche, it was about 20 years, and what a writer. I was not yet a philosophical mind. I knew some Plato books or other things, but Nietzsche was the one, like many people who started the desire to make philosophy instead of just literature. That book is the resume of 30 years of to get rid of the magic of Nietzsche, because there is an aesthetic of Nietzsche which is very fascinating. He accuses a lot his great friend and after his great enemy Wagner to make hypnosis. But the problem is Nietzsche, in the story of philosophy, is the first one that uses almost hypnotical to seduce. It works. It works because Nietzsche is a fantastic writer. Nobody ever written like Nietzsche. So for a literary guy at the start like me, Nietzsche, it was transgressive, it was seductive, it was like a kind of trance, in fact. And that, so everything here is my reception of Nietzsche, this enthusiasm almost fanaticism is not very original. It's not the simple case of the young Mehdi Kacem. Saad was like that a little bit, and I knew a lot of contemporary French intellectuals who, in fact, of course, were very shocked by my book. But a lot of them said, no, you are true. A friend of mine, which is a very, very talented young philosopher, said to me, you are right. All Nietzscheans are depressive. And the proof is, right now, I can't quit my bed. I can go to teach like every day, etc.
Do you consider Nietzsche one of the great philosophers? Would you qualify him as one of the great philosophers? And how would you describe what is most singular regarding Nietzsche's philosophy? What is, let's talk about the good side. What is most powerful or revolutionary regarding his thought?
The transgressive aspect of his work, that's what for some who read him is seductive, is a very anti-scholar style, anti-scholar way of proceeding and making and writing and teaching philosophy. There is some kind of will for vitalism, kind of a dithyrambe de Dionysos. It means a great panegyric of life, affirmation of life against negative affects, negative, etc., etc. But with the time, you see some kind of tricks. Let's put it this way. When you see the end of Nietzsche, and that's the mean of the subtitle, Psychosis of Western World, the psychosis of Nietzsche, which Nietzscheans subestimate very much, like it's an accident, it's not an accident, it's the logical, biographical consequence and deadline of his whole philosophy, of this whole dream of a new renaissance of the Western world on basis of total destruction of Christianity, of Platonism, and perhaps most of all these movements of his time, which he didn't support, like communism, anarchism, democracy, and so on. Nietzsche was totally allergic to all that, and yes, the libertarian Nietzscheans, let's call them this way, don't see the political program of Nietzsche, because there is a political program of Nietzsche, which is unfortunately very precise, very eugenistic, very new, democratic, very slavery. It's completely at the opposite of what we used to call the sense of history. There is a defense of slavery. So yes, you have since philosophical tradition, but tradition than the Western one, you have to go to the Republic of Plato for having such politics. It's almost maniac. It's not only eugenicism, it's very, very strong eugenicism, it's euthanasia of the weak, etc., etc. And what astonished me, that's perhaps the main reason I wrote this book, that of the Nietzschean, or especially the French Nietzschean, especially it makes me laugh because for me it's like a joke, the so-called left-ish Nietzscheans, which is a tribe, like everybody knows in France, and brilliant tribe, not mediocre ones.
I wanted to ask you regarding Nietzsche and France. Obviously, in France, we have the great revolutionary tradition from the revolution, and we have a very interesting fact that Nietzsche is a great critic of the Paris Commune. He is a great critic of Blanchism. He never touches Marx, which is very curious, but he has a strident criticism of socialism, of all forms of revolutionary thought. But something happens during the Second World War when the Nazis occupy France. And I wanted to ask you how the French Nietzscheans, like Bataille, as do you understand them as a response to the occupation of the fascists over France? Is that the best way to understand it?
The Nazi occupation of France was just a phenomenalization of German culture, to put it in the Gramsci language. The cultural hegemony of Germany on the whole Europe since all the 19th century, since Vienna, the Romanticism of Vienna. The only program in art was the Romanticism. There was no other one. And it was an inundation, a tsunami on the whole Europe. Wagner is the most gigantic and evident manifestation of this cultural hegemony of Germany. But all literature, music, the best musician ever were German. All the art of Western world, except perhaps America, for a reason perhaps we will talk after, the whole culture of Europe, the whole bourgeoisie cultivated Europe, were under the not direct but indirect hegemony of German culture. And that's true also with philosophy. If you take, there is one exception very interesting, which is Bergson, like a long time ago, Descartes before him. But the whole great moment of French philosophy, and it was an impressive moment, Sartre and Merleau-Ponty are disciples of Husserl. Derrida is, and his friend Jean-Luc Nancy, Lacoue-Labarthe, which I knew very well. Nancy personally, Lacoue-Labarthe, because he is one of my main influence. It's just a gigantic commentary. Lyotard is the same thing. Foucault, only juré by same thing. Nietzsche and Heidegger. Badiou is a son of Hegel. So this extraordinary French philosophical movement, which is for many sorts of reasons closed now, dead, was a whole development of German philosophy. So the facility, the weakness of the French population, French army, French politics, French intellectuals, French scholars, French writers, philosophers, of course, the way they accepted the invasion of Nazism was, it's very psychoanalytical, even psychiatrical. The facility, the easiness of accepting that is a symptom of a much more larger cultural hegemony. It was one century and a half, 2 centuries, who can say? So that's the total acceptance and of Nietzsche, the absence of criticism of his politics, except at the end of his life, La Coulabarte, which is in this book my main influence, is explained by that, and a concrete story of this misunderstanding of the political implication of Nietzsche ontology. Georges Bataille, who made a real live today, and my book is an answer to this absurd and infantilist saying that it was the sister of Nietzsche that gave Nietzsche to the Nazis, which is ridiculous. It's a sketch. It's a joke. Hitler, Goebbels, Himmler, and so on, all the dignitaries, I don't know if the word is correct in English, pardon my Arafat English, but I tried to, for the first time, to do it in English, were intellectuals. The Nazi chiefs were intellectuals. Hitler could say pages and pages of Schopenhauer without reading the text to his friends. They read everything. Like at the opposite, Stalin or Mao were intellectuals. And one, like Marx and Bakunin, when he was 6 Nietzsche later on, Nietzsche author. And one of the big mistakes of intellectuals is to be Manichaean. If you are a fascist or a Nazi, it means you are a stupid one, a mad one, no, you don't have to think. It's like in every game, in the chess, in the poker, in the soccer, in whatever you want. If you don't respect your enemy, you lose.
Yes.
Especially in France, I don't know America or elsewhere, but in France, yes, there is, and I realized talking to you that in a schizophrenic way, it's the two faces of the same thing. It's pure Manichaeism. I am leftish, so I'm a good person. He is rightish, so he is a bad person. I'm not wanting to see the same problem as everybody knows in a different manner will present itself in the subject of Heidegger. In France, for a long time, you couldn't speak about the engagement in the Nazism of Heidegger. So, what my not want to demonstrate that Nazis, it was a constellation, a spiritual constellation, very complex, in which the whole history of Germany, it's a book of philosophy of history, principally. The whole story of Germany is concentrated in the Nazi phenomena, the Nazi era. Don't simply recapitulate this whole history. It's not fair to say that, But it's neither fair to say, German culture is fantastic, Nietzsche is fantastic, Wagner is fantastic, everything is fantastic, but not Nazism. Nazism have nothing to do with that, have nothing to do with German romanticism, etc. All of that is completely, and for me, yes, today in France, and that's the reason why I don't live, one of the reasons why I don't live there no more. There is a complete illusion, a refuse to ask the good question, the dangerous question of what happened really in the next century, in the 20s, 30s, etc.
So, if Nietzsche's a philosopher, you have a disagreement with Alain Badiou's portrayal of Nietzsche as what he calls anti-philosopher. Can you describe why Nietzsche is not an anti-philosopher? And can you explain this, the problem with Badiou's Nietzsche? I mean, in Badiou's last seminar in Paris, it was on Nietzsche, and he has, since the 1990s, put forward this argument that Nietzsche is best understood as an anti-philosopher. And in your book, you criticize this concept. Can you explain this for us?
It's very complex. In the case of Badiou, for saying it's simply everything that is anti-Platonic is anti-philosophy. But what Badiou doesn't accept in Nietzsche, I think, is the revolutionary aspect of Nietzsche. Nietzsche wants to change the inner basis of philosophy, of way to making it. With this phantasm of a return to tragedy, but it's not only a Nietzschean phantasm. A lot of German, the Romantics, Hölderlin, Wagner, of course, had the same phantasm of returning to a sort of form of tragedy. And it was part of the Hitlerian doctrine. Going back to paganism, it was also a very Germanic phantasm. I speak about it in the book. It was the Volkisch movement, which were very mediocre intellectuals, like mediatic intellectuals today. But it was a very important movement in Germany, and the same phantasm of nationalism, of suprematism of Aryan, and very return, breaking with the Christian religion and go back to paganism. Nietzsche is simply the one that gives a genial form to all that, even with the supremacism, even with the anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism in Nietzsche, I saw things nobody saw before me. And the good Nietzscheans. So I can especially answer to Badiou because I didn't know recently he made, but the other same he wrote on Nietzsche, for me, he simply doesn't understand Nietzsche. It's the same thing with Marx. And that's the Althusserian tradition of reading Marx in France, is not to consider him like a philosopher. And that comes from Althusser in France, which is an importation of, which means Marx is not a philosopher, he's a science. You all know the consequences, and there is a great French philosopher here, not known by the mainstream public, including the academic public, but it was Michel Henry, who destroyed completely the Althusian mythology around Marx. So I don't take too seriously today's historical montages of Badiou. The most important, or you accept the Nietzsche proposition and you, I don't find the word, you follow it till the end, you follow the whole logic of Nietzsche. And it's very strange because sometimes Badiou speaks very well of other philosophers. For example, on Deleuze, he really makes the effort to read Deleuze. But Nietzsche, I've got the sensation, we are all like that. There are authors we can read, others we're not familiar with. But Badiou, it seems to me, sometimes he don't have the modesty to say, you could prove that even with Lacan, for instance. But
so that's very helpful. I wanted to ask you now regarding the politics of Nietzsche and fascism. A lot of people have argued that Nietzsche is bigger than fascism. There's multiple Nietzsches. There's Derrida has the idea that Nietzsche ultimately is a indeterminate. There's no center. There's no center to his thought. In your reading, it sounds like, in fact, there is a center, that you can identify a core. Because one of the things of the debate with Roland Barthes and Foucault around author, the concept of the author, that comes from an interpretation of the late fragments of Nietzsche. Mm-hmm. So they have, Derrida has this meditation in his book Spurs, where he says, we cannot locate a centrality of Nietzsche. And I wanted your opinion on this. Is your claim that this is inadequate, that Nietzsche must actually be seen with a political project, with a center? Because obviously this is the core of what they call the postmodern thesis as well. So how do you understand this Derridian interpretation, this kind of decentered, indeterminate conception of Nietzsche? Is it flawed? Is it inaccurate? And if it is inaccurate, why?
I will say both. I totally agree with considering Nietzsche much bigger than all of these political effects from Nazism and fascism to a certain form of anarchism bourgeois, I would say. A great philosopher is always much more bigger than... There is so many results of Plato, for example. But you can reduce Plato to... you can't resume Marx to Soviet Union, to what happened in China, etc. But you can't separate them neither. And what is false, that for me, I would say the social democratic weakness of Derrida went to his master, which is Heidegger, is this belief in total decentralization, but it's not only with Nietzsche. Like we all know, Derrida is with everything. Zizek is very funny when he speaks of that. And it's a political, it's really the belief for me in Derrida in social democracy. I remember I was speaking with Jean-Luc Nancy, and he said to me that Lacoulabar was very anarchist, situationist, like I am, was supposed to be. And he said, "Oh, Jean-Luc, you are social democrat like Derrida. I hate you," because sometimes Lacoulabar to get very well. So, no, Heidegger in his commentary of Nietzsche, which is so much stronger than the one of Derrida. Derrida, I find him lazy with Nietzsche. He don't work on Nietzsche like he works on Husserl or Heidegger. Heidegger, when he worked on Nietzsche, what is this monumental, it's 6 years of seminaries, it's in book, it's very clear. It's the philosophical explanation with the Nazis. That's all his commentary on Nietzsche is about. And like I do in a more modest form, Heidegger, but I isolate the principal ontologems. I don't know if you say that in English. Yes, the principal ontological themes of Nietzsche, because for a German between 32 and 49, the will of power, the nihilism, and other things, but principally those two, nihilism, you're a German in these years, every day in your radio, in newspaper, in the meetings, in the discourse of Hitler, Goebbels, etc. And nihilism is very clear for everyone at this time. It means Jew. And all of that is not, you can't, there is an obvious anti-Semitism in Schopenhauer, more hidden in Hegel, but it exists. Marx, I don't think so, but a lot of people generally politically not very clear, but he's an anti-Semite because of the Jew question. The Nazis didn't took their anti-Semitic ideology in other, not even in Schopenhauer, who was the favorite author of Hitler. No, it's all pseudo thing. No, it's all on Nietzsche. Until the end, because Mussolini had to deal with the Christian Vatican in Italy, which is, everybody know, very powerful. The German, it was not the same thing. Like Freud put it very well, the Germans are bad converted to Christianity. So all this new paganism that explodes politically with Nazism, philosophically with Nietzsche, but before him with the Romantics, with Schelling in philosophy, all this thematic of the return of paganism, which is in Germany for centuries and centuries, before Luther. That's the reason why I admire Luther so much, and one day I will make also monography about him, because Luther wins a war which would have been defeated one day. German nation, and a lot, Heidegger was totally, German people, they have a real problem with Christianity and to get rid of the paganistic past. And even today, the most, but it exists, especially in the Scandinavian countries, the most caricatural forms of fascism is always with the thematic of neo-paganism, of course, of the superiority of white race, etc., etc. So, no, for me, the Derrida version, like of decentralizing, there was nothing, there no master significant. No. Reality, and especially political reality, but not only, never from, let's resume it this way, in the Derridean phantasm, in the Derridian version of deconstruction. Not Einmal, Derrida, but this aspect of this thinking, no.
So in Nietzsche's critique of slave morality, a lot of interpreters have said, like, the primary enemy of Nietzsche is Rousseau and the revolutionary tradition, which of course encompasses the modern left, socialism, communism, anarchism. And I wanted to ask you how you understand Nietzsche's criticism of slave morality as a critique of what I call, like, taking the revolutionary genie from the bottle and trying to put it back in the bottle, trying to close down the revolutionary tradition. So Nietzscheanism is counter-revolutionary as a philosophy, and it provides a different direction from an egalitarian direction. So in that sense, it's in line with liberalism, but it is counter-revolutionary, and it is trying to obliterate the Rousseauist, Jacobin, Blanchist, Marxist, anarchist legacy. It's trying to perform a perversion on that. And so therefore, when you say left-Nietzscheanism is nonsense or it doesn't make sense, how do you understand this? Like, how do you understand the victory of Nietzsche over the left?
Everything, let's be a little bit Hegelian here. Everything makes sense. You can be a leftish Nietzschean. Mussolini was a Nietzschean, as I demonstrate in my philosophy, and the young Hegel, because I have problems with the academic Hegel, but I admire a lot the young Hegel of the phenomenology. So everything makes sense. It is possible because especially in the human being, is not rational. It's irrational, like we see it every day, including the political and geopolitical situation today. I'm not very interested by all the theories of Nietzsche about the moral is the moral of the poor, of the ressentiment. You can easily demonstrate that the riches it's so psychological for me. The real gap, and I speak of it, and not only in this book with Rousseau, and it has, of course, political indirect consequences. The real gap with Rousseau in the question, Nietzsche thinks that science, reason, he don't say technology in his century, except a little bit Marx. Nobody treat technology like a philosophic serious problem. Since Heidegger, things changed. But reason, thinking, defending the will of power, that is a catastrophe. And it's not different of the original sin. It's the same thing. Much rigorous explication of all that. Yes, it is an original failure in a certain sense, but how could the human being can be the absolute champion on earth since 30,000, 40,000 years of the whole earth, of all animals, of all beings, if he's not the animal of thinking, of consciousness, of technology, and so on. And it is a misinterpretation, absolute misinterpretation, a misreading of Rousseau by Nietzsche. I talk of that main book of which is the very long system of theonectic. That's what I would answer. And it is true, but there is such a gap between Rousseau and Nietzsche. You can even Rousseau demonstrates that the technical, the mind virtuosity of human inequality, political inequality on earth. So, in a sense, Rousseau is, yes, the birth of modern politics. Nietzsche's abstractions, aristocrats, superior man or superman, surhomme, I don't know the word in English, is like that. And it's not so, it's what I say in this book, for example, the Nietzscheans, the blind Nietzscheans, they say, Nietzsche, how, okay. He didn't influence the Nazis, he insulted German people very often. No, the case of Nietzsche is 100% implicated in German history. And when you read, like I do, the text of Nietzsche, what Nietzsche don't like with his contemporary German citizens, they're not enough strong, they're not enough surhomme. That's what Nietzsche don't like with. But the good old German who go to war, who is not afraid, who don't have the Viking. Nietzsche adores that. But there is such a gap, an abyss, Rousseau thinks of his politics, and what Nietzsche said, with a total benediction, with some kind of Protestant substract, because it's like the predestination in an atheist sense of the term, but it's providency. The aristocrat is aristocrat, the king is the king, the genius is the genius, and the others just have to serve or die.
So, Daniel, what if I can say, what Mehdi is saying is that Nietzsche is for the elites, for the warriors, for the overman, and he despises the weak, mediocre, average citizen. That's what he was trying to say.
Thank you. One of the big arguments you make in the book is that there is a genealogy of a causality, you could say, from Nietzsche's criticism of humanism to the emergence of transhumanism that we have today. And I want to ask you to describe how Nietzscheanism links up or connects to the modern transhumanist situation.
It's all, like I said, but it's almost at the beginning the opposite, because one of the philosophical illusions of Nietzsche, it's the return to the primitive savage. You see, it's Rousseau, but in a nightmare. Rousseau says, yes, we have quit our animal conditions, and it's some kind of failure, moral failure, at least, says Rousseau. And Nietzsche said, no, it will be very good to return the good old instincts, national morality, etc. It's to destroy, or only civilization of absolute domination of the powerful against the average. And transhumanism is the opposite. Let's get rid of all the animal aspect, instinctual aspect, do everything with algorithm, with artificial intelligence, with technology. There is some aspect, but for me, the weakness of both ways of thinking, when you compare to something someone like Rousseau or thinkers as different as Heidegger or Lévi-Strauss, to not come back to Aristotle. And that's very present in my work. human being, human condition is always a tension between our animal part and technological environment. I don't find another word in English. Pardon my Arafat English, it's far from perfect. In French, it's much more easier for me to express myself. But and it's a real gap and a never-ending sufferance. All the dualism of metaphysics, but also la chair et l'esprit, in French, flesh and soul, it becomes for a very empirico-transcendental doublé, which is physical world and technological world. But we will know absolutely anything about the so-called physical world. We will be like fish on water. We don't know it is their natural science, say biology, etc. Agriculture is already a kind of science, it's an archaic science. Because agriculture is the beginning of domination of physical laws by the mind, by technology, etc. And Nietzsche, there is an absolute misunderstanding of these points.
So is Nietzsche and Nietzscheanism a project for the preservation of bourgeoisie? Is it like a philosophy for the stabilization?
Nietzsche is an absolute elitist. He sees himself, he is a genius. So there is a dimension of aristocratism in Nietzsche, but there is also a religious dimension. So that's the terrible thing about him, because he lived like a saint. There is a martyr of Nietzsche. But no, I think he hates middle bourgeoisie, etc. He don't think in these terms. When you said, he don't speak about Marx, I think he didn't even heard about him. Blanchot was known because of no newspaper, etc. But here, for like Schopenhauer, Marx, or Nietzsche, the philosopher of the suspicion, like we called it here in France for a long time, in their century, they were absolutely unknown by the cultural public. It's the 20th century that made Schopenhauer in more discreet but very influential way. Explosion of Marx and explosion of Nietzsche is the 20th century, and not only on the... When you look at the French debate, for instance, and not only philosophers, in a sense, much more in writers, because vulnerable to ideology. Ideologies are a result of philosophies, is vulgarized philosophies. So the philosophers themselves, they're much more prudent with ideologies. That was the relation between Heidegger and Nazism. He's very seduced by Nazism, but also very prudent. Like put it Hannah Arendt, Heidegger is like a fox. He's very... No, absolute. It's nothing for me. What I want is superior men.
So a lot of Marxists claim that Nietzsche can contribute something to the project of radical emancipation or Marxist thought, because Nietzsche has a aesthetics that is quite advanced, quite sophisticated, quite powerful. I want to invite you to say something about Nietzsche's aesthetics. Here, I mean, like the conception of life for Nietzsche, and the idea even of Socrates, of philosophy as worth nothing if it doesn't allow you to live well. Does Nietzsche's aesthetics appeal to you? Is there something about it that actually has to be used or appropriated or that we learn from that is beneficial?
Difficult question. I don't say in the book, but there is some kind of an idealism of Nietzsche. In the sense, he fights for political emancipation of what he called the little people, la populace in French. And he's also idealistic in... he had very good taste in... for example, I was... often we've seen a lecture with music of poems of Henry Schein, and very forgotten here in France. I am in Tunisia, but I were in France. And Henry Schein was a fantastic poet. A book on story of philosophy in Germany, which for sure influenced very much Nietzsche. And Nietzsche said in one of his books that his idea of realism come from he had very good taste. Donc La Coulabarte, when he says when Nietzsche defends the Carmen of Bizet against Wagner, it's a joke. No, it's not a joke. Every musicologist, serious musicologist, Berlioz died very soon. But everyone say if he could have developed his work till the age of Wagner, it was possible to have another genius. So when Nietzsche, because it's part of the Nietzschean schizophrenia, because it's purely schizophrenic. In one hand, you have the Aryan, the strong man coming from the north, what he called the Hyperborean, and in the other side, the hate of the north and fascination, almost Wimbledonian fascination for the south. And that's the reason why he likes so much Carmen, the opera, and a lot of signs of another thing that is pre-fascist, or like say pre-Nazis phantasmas. So yes, there is all the possibilities. It's a book. I quote a lot of book in this one, the new one, with no citation, no quotes, no bibliographical references. It will be the opposite of the Nietzsche. But wonderful book about a woman, a choreographer, Nietzsche and the dance, and it's a very poetical book. It's but one more time, it's Nietzsche gives the most genial, the most synthetical form of really a Germanic intellectual and artistic background, which means this return to tragedy, this invention of a new form of trance in art, and that's, he puts something, because Romanticism was that, and in music, at least, it worked. It worked with Wagner, but when you listen Carmen, you get... music wasn't like that before, and when it becomes a little bit like that, it's with Germans, Haydn, Mozart, Beethoven, Catholic music, Roman music, Italian music, Baroque music, even Bach. There's no this dimension of trance. Today we've got Nietzsche will say, and if we come back, he will be, I think, against this very popular kind of Dionysian and neo-paganism. But this culture of trance, it's everywhere now. It's rock and roll, techno, Netflix, blockbusters. It wasn't like this at all 3 centuries ago. It's the Roman aesthetics with very solemnity, but there's not, and that's German creation. Nietzsche is just a chapter because he writes so well, because he's so erudition, and because theoretical and theoretical. He doesn't just appeal to I want trance in music. No, there is a Nietzschean trance in his text. And that's a very new way of writing. After that, in the 20th century, we have a lot of writers who create trance from Céline to Burroughs, Artaud, etc. But Nietzsche is the first time I see it so clearly. Yes, perhaps French poets, Lautréamont, sometimes Rimbaud, but all of that comes from Romanticism. So the cultural, like put it, Gramsci, German hegemony on Europe.
So in our interview, you made an interesting point regarding the meaning, the concept of the left today. And I wanted to ask you if you thought that, a lot of people speak regarding May 68, right? And about how May 68 has shaped or transformed the meaning of the left. And think with me for a moment. If that's true, it's interesting that Nietzsche was the main philosopher of May 68. So is Nietzsche, therefore, in a certain sense, maybe responsible for the incoherence of the left today? You see my point? Like, what has happened to the left? Because you said to me, like, you don't really think that we have a left anymore.
In Western world, no. The only place, perhaps, when South America, because they were, but there is a good, but everyone a little bit aware in the world knows that. People generally coming the best geopolitical analyst in the world. He's called Pepe Escobar. He's a Brazilian journalist, and he often speaks in very defense. I don't remember the name of the animator. Some of the best geopolitical analysis of. I make it short. Is because of the globalization. It's not possible anymore. You look only at geopolitics. That's what said Pepe Escobar recently. He arrived to this conclusion. The geopolitical situation in Ukraine, in Middle East, etc., is so explosive, especially in the West. In France, like he said, we have just pale ghosts of what was the radical left in the 60s and the 70s under a tsunami of wokeism. And we could speak hours, but it won't be a philosophical discussion about simply the American influence on which corrupted and, in my sense, corrupted in a deliberate way what was an authentic. It's the whole history of the 20th century. The war of the United States and the CIA against socialist revolution in South America. It was a hot war with a lot of atrocities, with a lot of coups d'etat. The most known is Allende, but there is so many others. That's the reason why they lie so much. They try to assassinate him, Maduro in Venezuela. A rare example of a real leftist, etc., but it's very isolated. Chavez, etc. And in Europe, the fight against, for instance, the Italian Communist Party, which was the most intelligent Communist Party in Europe, and its false flag bombs attributed to the anarchists, to the communists, and after that, no, it was the neo-fascists, it was the government, it was the Loge P2 parallel government in Italy. Debord speaks of it in his commentaries of Société Spectacle. And in Africa, it's even worse. There is a leftish, socialist, I prefer this word, very important movement. I can show you sites, but you have to read French and Arab. In Algeria, very well done, Marxist Lenin. I can present you the intellectuals in all of them are Marxists. And there was Nasser, there was Gaddafi, etc. There was an authentic socialist. Was a richer country in. But you see, we don't speak philosophy anymore. So let's come back to this. And so this, yes, perhaps this, vulgar version of Nietzschean aesthetics in the mood of Western ends, of losing a little bit your mind. Of course, there is cultures of trance, the shamanic ones, the voodoo ones. In India, there is that. It's not, not Muslim. And I thought the other day, for ending on a good illustration of that, Star Wars, I thought it's, yes, a popular, vulgar, we'll say. Star Wars is like the tetralogy, it's the same thing, it's almost the same history. And even the music, what is the music of Star Wars? You listen to it, it's Wagner for fantastic poets in America, the jazz is fantastic novelists. But there is also these aspects of, not only Nietzsche, all the German, because that's a cliche of the German, very disciplined, very calm, including when he has to make oars. No, there is also in Germany a culture of, even now, if you look at Berlin, it's the most crazy city to be in the world. So
yeah, it's interesting because in Zarathustra, Nietzsche says that the Dionysian community will dance on the grave of Rousseau. So they will form a community that imitates Rousseau, but overcomes him, completely overcomes him. And I know in France you have a great liberal historian, Francois Furet, who argues that the French Revolution is dead, is completely over. So in your analysis, is the absence of the left, the non-existence of the left, how do you understand that historically? And how could something like the revolutionary left re-emerge? What do you have any optimism regarding this possibility?
No, at the short term, no. But I repeat myself. You have to look at history, of course. China is very interesting. I was very anti-Maoist because of Badiou and because all the generation of 60s normally Maoists, because they talk of those uniquely and solely about the cultural revolution. But when you study the Chinese history, is much more complicated. If Mao is still venerated simply because he saved the country, nobody realizes now for saying the level of cult of our so-called intellectuals. It was in 49, before the communist Chinese party took the power in China, the poorest country in the world. The average age of dying is 6. Nowadays, it's 84, a Western level. There was no education. Today is 100%. So, of course, China is not the so-called liberal democracy, which became by the way, a joke, a great hoax. Perhaps it was true 30 years ago or 40 years ago, but it's not true anymore. But it's not a totalitarian, suffocating system. There is a great young emerging philosopher, really brilliant, a Chinese. He teaches in Holland, which name is Yu Kui, excuse me. And read him to understand the complexity of the Chinese situation, the Chinese story, etc. But the fact is, it's always the same story. Why the Chinese situation was so apocalyptic? Mao and his troops took the power is because of the Opium War of the British, who devastated absolutely. The same thing. You have caricature on North Korea. Oh, look, how he's mad, how he's bad, etc. If you don't know what absolute butchery was the war of Korea, you can't understand, of course. I say all that because Africa is exactly the same. What's happening? I was in a restaurant, others, servers, and we had a very interesting discussion. They discuss on the political situation in Congo. In Congo, you have it's one of the countries with the more gold, and it's all in France. So you see, colonization never ended with a simple formal political decolonization. In South Africa, and I hope it will go on. The guys, the juntas, because it's juntas, but they have no choice because all puppets, and little by little, the South Africa is growing and growing, but there is a little moves more complicated in Maghreb, in Tunisia. When you are Marxist, a left, you have to, and that's a lot of fully leftist, but the more aware ones, like Pepe Escobar, who say today to have an evident global or even and certainly not in the Western world, but you have to look very carefully at geopolitics. That's
So you said in the interview that we conducted something very interesting regarding the subjectivity of the citizens in the core Western regions, that they are ontologically right-wing. But it's very difficult for people to they therefore, like, that's my question to you, is like, can you explain what that means? I wanted to understand what this means, which is why in the West, and I know, for example, the last time we spoke, you had a great admiration of the Gilets jaunes, of the Yellow Vest movement, and things of this nature, even though Badiou is highly critical of it and so on. Where is the most interesting appearance of the class struggle in the West? I know you are very critical of the West these days, but where do you see any sign of a resurrection of something like a appearance of something radical? What would you say to people? Because I know you did a wonderful in your book that's translated into English, you said that we live in a time of austerity and of you call lean times. So for as a philosopher, it's very difficult to find things that are compelling, things that point to something emancipatory on the horizon. It's almost impossible. So what would you say to people that live in these core regions, that face these same kind of things you said of manic depression when they look out at the state of the world? Do you have any advice?
It's very simple. It's autopsy. It's autonomy. So a very anarchistic thing. But the global picture is so depressing that no, I'm. And geopolitics. People. The cultural revolution of Mao was a mistake. But like said Deng Xiaoping, it's 17% good what did Mao and 13%. But it's not only the internal Chinese miracle, because it's a miracle. We won't talk about Russia because nowadays it's a little bit tricky. Speaking of that with the American public. But it was not only, if you look at the numbers of to go out from poverty, the Chinese 1 million people, and we see it in Tunisia was very affected because tourism is very important in Tunisia, because we have nothing. We have just fruits. Revolution of 2011, I was there. I can speak it. But there is a partnership with China. And the most important for me, for giving an example, shocking, when you have your smartphone, we World Cup.
Yes. Well, I think it's very interesting because in the Arab world today, we see the situation happening in Gaza. And I do want to actually, if it's okay, speak to you about this. I don't know if you have thought about it. I'll give you a second. By the way, Saad, I can make edits to this. I have I can edit the gaps.
Yeah.
No.
So, Mehdi, I wanted to ask you regarding the genocide in Gaza. If it's okay, like, what is your assessment of the situation?
Yeah. Can I also ask a question at the same time?
Yeah, of
Maybe,
course. Go ahead.
maybe, do you think that there is genocide in Gaza, or like the other side says that there is not a genocide? According to your
I
definition,
did not. What was the question? I didn't hear.
me
Le
or
son est pas
Mehdi?
très bon, Saad.
Ask it again, Saad.
Yeah, Mehdi, according to your definition, can you hear me? Tu m'entends?
Très mal. Très mal. Là, je t'entends mieux.
Oui, d'accord. Donc, selon tes définitions, according to your definitions, is there a
J'entends plus.
genocide in
I can ask. Can you hear me? I can ask.
Yeah.
We want to know about your interpretation regarding the genocide in Gaza. Does this qualify as a war? Is this something different? How do you understand it from the standpoint of genocide? Is it what's the framework that you use when you look at the Israeli assault on Gaza over the last year?
Do you consider it a genocide or not?
I consider it either like the most brutal, the most cruel and atrocious genocide of the whole industrial era. So it is a drama, catastrophic, an apocalyptic chapter of West written since a year or two. That's one of the main reasons I couldn't stand it anymore in France, because ideologically it's a nightmare. You can, and it's the same thing that I said about Nazism, the external culture to Nazism. You can't make an equivalence, but you can't separate the German origins. The same things is the Aufhebung of Hegel I'm doing. Is the catharsis of Aristotle. I worked a lot in my main book on how the Aufhebung of Aristotle, which means you sublimate something, but you conserve something. I give an example. I'm on a wood table. I suppressed a tree. The conservation of the suppressed tree is the wood, and the form of this conservation, but it's interesting, conservation and conversion, and traduction, etc. So the Aufhebung is that, it's Hegel. You suppress something and you conserve something. So Zionism is to Judaism, Judaism and the influence of Western culture is in the same rapport than Nazism. You suppress something, you conserve something, and you give another form. Unfortunately, the form that Zionism pretend to give, the Aufhebung in Zionism, is absolute. It's a nightmare, not only for the Lebanese, for a lot of people. And if we want to go too far in geopolitics. But do it indirect way. You have to have the influence of the neo, which pretend to be a philosophical movement, and it is because it was a philosopher, one of the worst of the 20th century, which was Leo Strauss, but fortunately is the most influenced philosophers worldly because of neo-cons that took the stage since 50 years. And when you understand that, you understand. I discovered that with one of my main philosophical influences, which was Rainer Schurman. And in his masterpiece, Rainer Schurman's, there's a lot of notes, and he was German, and the last chapter of the book is Heidegger and Nazism, the best text ever written about that. But there's a lot of notes in this book. 96. There is a new supremacism is installed in here in United States. It's the same old shit. And it's not a symptom of triumph. It's a broken hegemony. And a broken hegemony, I don't know, when the Soviet bloc collapsed, I said in another interview, not for a friend who is a great historian, and I said when the East Bloc in Europe collapsed after USSR, they were for play. They were okay. We admit it didn't work anymore. We're gonna rebuild. Totally, they rebuilt with the Americans because Europe is only a puppet of now diplomatic and geopolitical puppet of America. And the collapse now is in the West Bloc. A lot of people don't realize it. In France, realize it, they are invisibilized, censored. Sometimes they escape, like myself, because it's exactly the same thing. Europe, the European Union, is an absolute Soviet, totalitarian, with a bunch of stupid people in the European Commission that give orders to all the countries of Europe. But Soviet system, it was for the ideal of communism, and whatever mistakes they made, it was a sincere will to socialism and communism. Here, the wish of European Union, which means USA, and of course Israel, symbolizing the Western world in the barbarian and subdeveloped Middle Age. We are not fair play because our politics are to new. But the Western Bloc is total collapsing now. When you're a philosopher, there is But even the more lefties, they don't see that. It was a local symptom of this total collapse of the Western power, the Western hegemony. So let's just hope there is no nuclear escalation, because we all lose at this game.
Yes,
capitalists, ultraliberalists are bad losers.
yes, it's very difficult because in the 20th century, right, we had socialism within the parliamentary system. They had what's called social democracy. But like Jeremy Corbyn and Bernie Sanders and Mélenchon, they have been disempowered. They've been removed. So therefore, within the liberal establishment, there is no anti-war potential, right? In the West, it's been taken out. So
there is at the popular level, but at the representative level, there is nothing. Rigged. In France, it's totally rigged. The mainstream media are entirely possessed by the six families, the most rich billionaires. One of them is the second, Bernard Arnault, is the richer man of the world after Elon Musk. Frankly, it's not, I repeat, because for me it's very important. If you look at the whole world, at the whole geopolitical moves in the world, for example, in Central Africa, complicated and horrible way, of course, in the Middle East, but also in South America, when for the worst, what happens in Argentina, but for the best, perhaps, hoping that the CIA don't kill him, Maduro. You've got the whole puzzle without so many lacks. You don't know everything, of course, but yes, you're like a child, like a piece of the puzzle. Everything is coherent. When you do something here, it reacts here. So that's the message. No, I'm not optimistic on Europe, on Middle East. I think nobody knows because it's the core. At least since the 7th October, but story of Israel and Palestine didn't start the 7th October, like all the Western mainstream media says.
So do you think that
when I look at the world, South America, Asia, or even Africa, they will all horrible. What they did, what NATO did to Libya, but it's really, it has nothing to do with dictatorship. It was already the BRICS, which Gaddafi wanted to make a Pan-African money independent from the dollar. So he was really a visionary. It was not the mad drug dictator, sadistic that mainstream media. He was very intelligent, cultivated. You never seen a bibliothèque like one of it. He read everything, even Marx, Bakunin, and he understood very well, and he applied. In the Libya of Gaddafi, you didn't have rent to pay, education for free, health for free, etc. It was, he often used the word socialism in his discourse, which are very clever, very intelligent. And in Western world, they made believe me that this man was a monster. Everyone in Tunisia, which is a little bit cultivated, but even workers, even farmers, they know who are Gaddafi, who know who are Saddam Hussein. It's not the caricatural, neo-racist, neo-colonialist cliches that vehiculated the Western world about them. So,
what do you think of the liberal Islamists like Rashid Ghanouchi and these figures? Like, are they kind of like puppets? Yeah, of the West.
Yeah.
What is your opinion regarding this? Arab Spring.
It's very complex, but yes, it was some purpose. Absolutely. I understand it. I understood it for the first time I saw him, Ghanouchi. And the explication is very simple. I don't know the exact term in English, les frères musulmans, the Muslim brothers. It's an instrument to infiltrate Arabic countries and to put chaos. And in Tunisia, it worked very well. So now, I don't know, because for 4 months I was in. For private reason, I couldn't. But now it's over. But for 10 years, it's like the Ben Ali family. It was gangsters. Gangsters. Des voleurs. Comment on dit déjà voleurs?
Thieves.
Yeah, it's interesting because last time I spoke to you a few years ago, we spoke about the Arab Spring, and there was a moment of a profound optimism, which now we see after Bashar al-Assad in Syria. We see what happens in Tunisia. We see the military takeover in Egypt. We see this the fact that the major Arab powers don't even support Palestine at this moment. So it's a very difficult situation. We see the sectarianism emerge. I wanted to ask you, like, obviously the Palestinians, they have the right to resist, but how would you advise like that resistance? You know, because a lot of people say, well, they should align with Iran, they should align with Russia, they should align with the axis of resistance. But that seems to me like a reproduction of a new imperial World War III, if you advocate for that. So it's a very difficult situation. What would you say regarding the geopolitics of the Arab world right now?
Like c'est des guerres, philosophy doesn't have to prophetize, but philosophy don't have to sleep neither. I was about to answer you. I will answer you only in presence of my lawyer, because when we speak about things like that, we walk on eggs, like we say in France. It's very difficult. It's like colonization. Colonization never stopped. That's Western mythology. And the so-called Cold War, with a bigger redistribution, but not so much. The Afghanistan case, for example, is fascinating when you see what was the Soviet influence on Afghanistan. It was half of the women were at school and university. the emancipation, etc. And the CIA alimented the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, which is the creation of the CIA, etc. So it's a long story, but the Cold War never ended, in fact. It was un grand récit, like said Lyotard, a new big history, a big mythology. Fukuyama, interesting language. Fukuyama, end of history, triumph of liberalism and democracy of market, etc. But all that was story for Western children. Or continued after with the expansion of NATO in Europe, with all the countries of the ex-East. All of that, it's the continuation of, and to go back to philosophy, because it's a long, I knew the risk of the interview we will have to speak geopolitics. Now I'm gonna spend a year in quasi-literal sense of the term in the ivory tower for working. But philosophers are really, instead of making these stupid scholar colonial studies, so what shocked me so much with the colonial studies, what about the colonization of today? It's even worse than the formal political colonization of yesterday. So what's happening in Central Africa, what happened in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Libya, most of all, and for the moment of hope of Tunisian and Egyptian revolution, it was a true revolution, not false flag revolution. Like there was a genius gamble from the Western world that used those revolutions to attack, especially Gaddafi, and destroy Libya. The first thing Gaddafi does when he takes the power in 59, if my memory don't betray me, abolishing slavery. Nowadays, since the intervention of NATO, slavery is back, torture is back, is civilian war. They were the 15 people richer in the world and the richer in Africa, and he wanted to reconstruct Africa in the basis in de-dollarized African money. They killed him here and they tortured him, they filmed the torture. Those are the barbarians, we are the civilization. Seriously. 85% of the humanity now seeing what happened in Gaza, but knowing the truth on Iraq, on Afghanistan, on Syria, and especially for me, politically, almost philosophically, because Gaddafi is the same thing. It was a great intellectual, but there is such a meta-racism, including in the ultra-leftish. When Badiou or Zizek speak of Gaddafi or Saddam Hussein, them also, they don't understand the real reasons those wars have been.
So
sometimes here I'm a little Shermanian. So sometimes I feel so sad. So a little bit political philosophy, and let's do phenomenology. We don't have to be too afraid, even if, of course, nuclear escalate. Yes, that there was Tunisian and Egyptian real revolution by the East. Here it's sensibly different, but
well, it's interesting to me. I don't know if
trouble every day.
I don't know if you are aware, but speaking of Nietzsche, he expressed his admiration for Islam in his later years, actually. And you know that he was aware of Ibn Abdul Wahhab in Saudi Arabia. And he thought this is very interesting because he thought that Islam was a anti-egalitarian expression of the Abrahamic religion. So he liked Islam. He wanted to actually write a book, you know, celebrating Islam. Interesting fact.
Here is the same thing because no, when you look the natural way a Muslim comport with when you ask help to somebody, at least in Tunisia, I don't know, perhaps Saad will say it's something different about Morocco. It's such a sense of solidarity, so perhaps they no. I think the exact opposite. I'm not a pan-Muslim. I'm interested in all religions. I'm a fervent agnostic. Sometimes I believe in something I don't think of it. But for example, there is in the Islam, there is political economic elements in Islam that anticipates Marxism or Anarchism, but the question Marxian of the exploitation of the plus-value of the bank. So I think plus to recover my books, but they are all in. I don't have my bibliothèque right now for this reason. France, Tunisia, etc. Or I look in the internet, but I'm already sure that he's. And as usual, he reverses the real thing. Don't ask me more. I prefer to remain elliptic.
Well, Mehdi, I thank you very much. I think we have to break soon, but I want to thank you for your time, for your insights, and I want to end by asking you on a positive note because we have Saad, and Saad is obsessed with Nietzsche. Even after you have provided this thorough critique, Saad still says, I am a Nietzschean to the end. And I love that about you. I love that about you, Saad.
Thanks. After reading Mehdi's book on Nietzsche, I could say that I'm still a Nietzschean, but a less tortured Nietzschean. But Mehdi's book, it made me understand Nietzsche in a more healthy way.
Mehdi, what is your favorite text of Nietzsche? Do you have a text, a book that you find like the best? If you were to say, for people that maybe they have read little Nietzsche, what would you say is a good place to start? And what is your all-time favorite work?
More the self-portrait. It makes me laugh. And the Wagner case, same thing. And I've got zero problem with this text. I completely okay what he's saying is wonderfully written. It's very funny. For the aesthetics. So you see, you've got to respect the enemy. It's certainly impossible to not respect Nietzsche. There is an heroism of Nietzsche, and you've got to respect. You've got a courage.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's very good. I have the same debate with my comrades on the left in the United States because they say you should be anti-Nietzschean, but I say no. Nietzsche will perform a victory if you reject him totally.
Exactly.
Because this is actually one of the what you might call the inversion of dialectics. So therefore, Nietzsche has to be respected immensely in order to overcome him. If you are
Absolutely.
vulgar anti-Nietzschean, he will triumph over you, in my opinion.
He will strike again and again and again.
Yeah, it's a very subtle point, but it's essential. So, look, I thank you very much for this interview, and I'm excited to share it with everybody. Let's meet again to discuss your other work. I'd love to talk with you about the theory of catharsis and pleonectic desire and all of that. And I hope that we can get your work into English. It would be essential. It would be essential. Maybe Saad, you can start the translation process.
Sure. Mehdi, Daniel a dit que merci beaucoup pour tout et qu'il espère faire d'autres émissions avec toi pour discuter de tes concepts de catharsis, de pléonectique.
Oui, j'ai bien compris.
Et il espère que plus tes travaux seront traduits en anglais, à part le transgression.
J'ai bien compris.
Okay, I have to go, my friends. Thank you both very much. We'll be in touch. Thank you, Mehdi. Thank you, Saad.
Thank you. Pardon my awful English. I will try to progress.
Very good. It's amazing.